Hello, this is Owen from Panchico, and you're listening to URN.
This is Greg James, and you're listening to University Radio Nottingham, otherwise known as URN, or EARN if you get it wrong. Go well!
Hello, a very warm welcome to the big picture on this very hot afternoon. We're back after what has been hopefully a lovely Easter break. I am still, after all these weeks, Felix Hawes, and today I am joined by Ben.
Hello, Felix.
Hello, Ben, and for the first time, but no stranger to URN, Mark.
Hello, Felix.
Hello, Mark. So, what are we talking about today? Well, lots happened over Easter, but we're going to cover today Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. He has announced that he is running for president again in 2024, so we'll be talking about him. We'll also be talking about a certain article that was written by Dianne Abbot in The Guardian, with The Observer, I should say, sorry, the Sunday paper for The Guardian. And we'll be talking about the illegal immigration bill, which has become, well, it's passed the House of Commons. So there we are. We'll start off with, no, I should say, first of all, do message in if you have anything to say. And you may also wonder that obviously a week today is the King's coronation, God save the King. We will be talking about the monarchy at a future date when we have more passionate monarchists back from their Easter break. And we won't be on next week because I, as I'm sure all our lovely listeners, will be partying for the King. But first of all then, let's talk about Joe Biden over in the USA. So it's not a total surprise that he's announced that he's running for president again in 2024. He is currently 80. He'll be 82 when he starts his second term, if he, of course, gets elected. First of all, though, let's address the fact. What are your general thoughts about Biden running again? We have to bear in mind the fact that he is already above average age in America. And if he finishes his second term, he'll be 86. That's quite old. What do you think to Biden running again? Is it the right thing to do? Ben?
I think he is too old, really, to run. I think you can see from his campaign ad, he mumbles his lines. He's rarely on screen, actually, during the ad for more than 2 or 3 seconds at a time. His press conferences are normally a disaster. He was in Ireland the other week, and he famously confused the All Blacks with the Black and Tans, the very controversial, war crime committing British Army regiment back in the 20s. I think he is far too old. Well, it's not that he's too old. It's that I don't really think he's all there, to be honest. And because people like Bernie Sanders, who are just as old as Joe Biden, I think do have the faculties to be president. I just don't think Joe Biden does at this point. But I think it's worth bearing in mind the state of his opposition at the moment.
Yes.
The Republican Party is in disarray at the moment, with Trump, who may well be indicted soon, well in the lead to be the next nominee. Mike Pompeo, one of the other people in the race, has dropped out the race because he sees it as so hopeless trying to stop Trump. So, yes, Biden is too old to run, but it's worth bearing in mind that this is not a case of he'll obviously lose because the American people will see he's not fit to be mentally to be president.
Well, that's an interesting question about what we think will actually happen in terms of the next election itself, and certainly we'll take this opportunity to talk about the Republican Party. Biden, of course, being a member of the Democrat Party. Mark, what do you think to Biden announcing he's running again? Is this the right decision, or should he step down in favour of someone more youthful?
Well, I think it's a tricky one because I think looking at the Democrats currently, I can't think of anybody else that would potentially be popular enough to win again. I mean, if you look at, the one of the suggested options is Kamala Harris. I don't think she's particularly popular enough to win, really. And there just generally doesn't seem to be that much appetite amongst them to even bother kind of challenging him, like Joe Biden in the kind of primary stage, which kind of does show that there's, I don't know. I think they probably are anticipating it to be a pretty nasty race. Whoever ends up getting the Republican nomination, whether or not it's Trump or DeSantis, as they seem to be the two most likely contenders currently. And to be honest, I don't blame them. As for Joe Biden, I mean, I like Joe Biden. I think he's funny, which is obviously probably not the best kind of way to start describing him for good like leader of the free world as funny. But he seems like a nice enough bloke. He isn't completely nuts, and even if he isn't like fully possessing all of his marbles, like some people are suggesting, at least it's not in the somewhat dangerous sense, I guess. I think, Ben, you raise a good point with sort of Bernie Sanders and the fact that he's around a similar age but seems to be in somewhat possession of his marbles. And what I found interesting was on the day that it was announced, the BBC did some interviews, vox pops of elderly Americans, and most of them actually didn't really seem to mind. Like all of the elderly Americans were just like, yeah, his age isn't really that big of a deal, which is fairly understandable. But I think if you look at the polling, it kind of does speak for itself as to how excited America would be to be sort of seeing him in charge again, especially. I mean, if he's like this currently, can you imagine him in like 5 years?
No, I agree. I would push back on the point about there being no other viable candidates. It's very rare for a president not to seek re-election within their own. In fact, I was interested in this, so I did the stats. The last time someone has been elected for one term and served 4 years and then decided not to run again was Rutherford B. Hayes, who was elected in 1876.
It's a long time ago.
So it's certainly it would be abnormal for him not to run again.
Extremely rare. And then once you start factoring in where neither the president or the vice president sought re-election, I don't even know how far back that would be. Certainly a long time. But there are popular or Democrats who would be more popular than Joe Biden to run, and the idea that the Democratic Party is some wasteland of good candidates, I don't actually agree with. Raphael Warnock, who is a senator from Georgia, I think is a fantastic candidate.
I think he's lovely.
John Ossoff, also a senator from Georgia.
But they've not really been around for long.
Well, neither was Barack Obama, though. Barack Obama was only a senator for 2 years before he ran for president. But governors of states, Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, both, well, Whitmer has been there for, I believe, 4 years. I think Josh Shapiro is more recent. But both of them, I think, are fully capable and good candidates of being president. I think
because I'm used to sort of the old crowd of your Elizabeth Warrens and your I forget who the dude is, the Californian governor,
Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, Newsom. He would be
an awful candidate.
Awful candidate.
That's why I was almost convinced the Democrats would try running him.
Well, that's fair. Not only is it rare for a sitting president not to run again, but also it's rare for there to be any sort of serious challengers in the primaries. So in America, for those that don't know, you have the primaries first, which is where the parties, all of them, but we obviously mainly focus on the Democratic and the Republican parties, their members choose their candidate. So it will actually, I think, start at the end of this year, that process. And then the two chosen candidates will then go against each other in the presidential election along with the minor parties. Now, it's rare for there ever to be a serious challenger to the incumbent president from the party. Not impossible, but it's rare. There have been two candidates, as far as I'm aware. Unfortunately, I've locked myself out of my phone, so I can't get their names. But one of them is Bobby Kennedy's son. Oh no, I'm back in my phone. Bobby Kennedy's son is running against Biden.
Oh yes, no, I remember reading that because I was like, oh, Kennedy, nice, and then I read, oh, anti-vax. Okay.
Yes, he is an anti-vaxxer, so I'm not sure that's the right crowd in the Democratic
but he's
Party.
Bobby Kennedy's son, so I think he's worth.
Because what the America needs is another Kennedy.
Yeah,
and Marianne Williamson, who is a founder of. I can't.
Yes, a unique individual is Marianne Williamson.
Yes, do you know more about her?
I think she's the one who said that. I think she referred to Trump as like a devil or a dark force or something in the last. She referred to him in like religious terms. They need to take him on, and she's an eccentric character.
So you don't think either of these have any chance really of beating Biden and the Democrats?
I think Kennedy will just be a bit like who was the dude that ran against? Who was the billionaire that ran against Biden last time around?
Oh, Bloomberg.
Yeah, I just see him as another one of those sort of.
I think he's a lot less because Bloomberg. There was a point in the primaries where it looked like Bloomberg might win the nomination brief, but there was a moment. There was
a bit that Sanders that looked as if he was going to get it.
Yes, but I mean those were in a sense serious competitors. What I mean is, I think I'd compare the Marianne Williamson and Bobby Kennedy's son more to. I mean, I've heard so little about them. I didn't actually know they were running until you mentioned it now.
Which goes to say something, doesn't it?
Yes.
Do you think there could be anybody else that could announce to be running against Biden that actually could have a chance? Or do you think the other Democrat candidates, those that are perhaps his critics on the left of the party, might not stand just because obviously party unity might be better for that? What do you think?
I wouldn't be totally surprised if you saw someone from the left, or in America they call the left wing of the Democrats the progressives. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them has a go. The issue with that is a lot of the progressives, so last time the champions of the progressives and the Democrats were Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Both of them are pretty happy with the work Joe Biden's done. So I don't think there's the same kind of forceful opposition to Joe Biden that there was, for example, to Hillary Clinton, or even to Joe Biden last time.
Yeah.
Because he has passed some proper progressive legislation around healthcare and particularly around climate change. So maybe there's room for a progressive to run, but I doubt they'd have much success, but you never know.
And equally, I think, looking at... I can see, if I were in the Democrat camp right now, looking over at the Republican side, it's one of those... I think the real risk posed by either of the main Republican candidates is probably large enough that I think they would want to minimise the amount of messing about. On their side, they probably want to, you want to appear quite strong and united against your candidate.
Yeah.
And if you have, endless people standing in, challenging the incumbent in primaries, it can kind of deteriorate your, how strong you look to any would-be voter of DeSantis or Trump. Quite interestingly, I'm looking at the Republican side. I'm interested to see if any damage will be done to the Republicans as an institution because DeSantis versus Trump is going to be full of mudslinging.
Yes.
And I would love to see whether or not the Republicans would be able to after that load of primaries will be able to effectively recover to run an okay campaign for whoever wins the primary, because it would be. I can imagine it being quite broken.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that now, the Republicans. So, obviously, we predict, I'm sure we're all in agreement here, that Biden is probably going to get that nominee for the Democratic Party. Let's look at the Republicans. Obviously, both of you have touched on this. Donald Trump is running again. So, it could potentially be a rematch, which I don't know. Ben, do you know the last time that happened, the rematch? I think in your research.
Yes, it would have been 1956. Dwight Eisenhower versus Adlai Stevenson Jr. again, because they ran in 52 and they ran in 56.
There we are. Thank you for that. So it's not a long time ago, not quite as long as the other stat you told us earlier, but a long time ago still. But there have been others that have officially announced. Nikki Haley, is that how you pronounce this? Yeah, Nikki Haley. Larry Elder, who is a Fox, I think he's a Fox News, at least he's a TV personality. I don't want to say he's definitely...
No, I haven't heard of him either.
He's announced. There are a couple of others, again, I've not heard of. One is the former governor of Arkansas.
Yes, I think I have
Asa Hutchinson.
Yes.
And then there's also a CEO of a company as well. Probably not a serious contender, let's be honest. Other people that haven't announced yet that are looking likely are, of course, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and Mike Pence, the former vice president under Donald Trump. Of course,
that would be really interesting.
The two of them obviously fell out.
Who's the biggest lunatic out of those two?
Pence and Trump.
Pence and Trump. DeSantis.
Oh, Pence and DeSantis. Oh, that's difficult. Both are pretty bad. Yeah.
Well, Pence and Trump fell out because Pence accepted the result of the 2020 election.
Traitor.
And,
I love how that's like a
communist.
Metric. I love how that's like a metric for sanity currently is like.
Yeah.
Do you accept the result of an election or not?
You never know. Of course, Jeb Bush might. No. What do you think? What do you think to this? And Mark, you said about the mudslinging. Thing about Mike Pence being there too. I mean, Donald Trump, looking back to his primaries, I looked at some of his the primary debates for 2016.
Because he went
and the
all
way
in on...
the way he works is he will just say whatever he wants, true or not, to any contender.
I think he suggested that like Ted Cruz's family were linked to the assassination of JFK.
Yes, I also think he said something that someone's father was Fidel Castro. I don't know about. I can't remember if that's. Go on, Ben.
Okay, brief point. I'm not convinced that I think that's linked to Justin Trudeau. There's a theory that Justin Trudeau is the son of Fidel Castro. Research it. I think I'm not endorsing it, but I think there's more weight to it than on first appearance it looks like. But
well, there we are. Look that up, listeners of The Big Picture, and if type in your message what you think about who is it Pierre Trudeau or Fidel Castro as the father of Justin Trudeau. Anywho, what do we think to this then? Who do you think is going to get the nominee? Is it going to be a Trump landslide? Do you think DeSantis, who's I think we probably all agree is the next likely candidate? What do you think that's going to look like? Is DeSantis even going to run? Already, Trump's calling him Ron DeSanctimonious. Ron DeSantis is very popular amongst the Republican Party, but so is Trump. And Mike Pence obviously is probably more favoured by the establishment Republicans that were a bit off-put by Trump's way of doing things, even if they agreed with many of his beliefs. What do we think to this then?
I think it kind of depends and probably comes down to personality, because really, like, if the Republicans wanted a Trumpian type person who, you know, if you look at DeSantis, like, he's got stuff done. It's been awful stuff and nasty stuff, but, you know, it's stuff.
Yeah,
whereas looking at Trump, obviously, it's just a complete mess currently. Like, you know, what's he like? Got arrested?
Well,
you know,
no, but as president, he had a pretty remarkable, I mean, bad stuff, but a pretty remarkable raft of achievements. Something like a third of all judges at the federal level were appointed under Donald Trump.
Yeah,
which is a remarkable achievement.
But the thing is, if you look at DeSantis, there's not really much stuff that DeSantis does that Trump wouldn't do.
I think Ron DeSantis is more conservative than Trump. I would argue.
Yeah, but this is.
Because DeSantis is, you know, obviously when it comes to like Florida and like LGBT rights, absolutely awful. Yeah. And then as soon as Trump announced he was going to go for re-election, he was said on day one he would kind of stop any access to hormone replacement therapy for trans people. Yeah. So kind of it's similar, like the stuff they will do to try and get each other's votes. Yeah. I think more or less cancels out their different, like the minor differences in their beliefs. Yeah. And I think some Republicans are just obsessed with Trump.
Some.
They just look, but still. There's something about his mysticism that they love about it, and therefore, if that's kind of strong enough, then and considering how much they consider it, don't seem to care about his, weirdly enough, like how his arrest was so controversial even amongst like the more sensible Republicans, like Mitt Romney said that it was
he's a communist.
Mike Pence did actually called out the decision to prosecute Trump.
So, considering how loads of Republicans think that's kind of a sham, I could just as well see a Trump second run. Because whilst the American public don't want to see Biden versus Trump again, that doesn't. I think if you look at individual Republicans, probably quite a few of them are keen to see Trump run again.
Yeah, well, it's the selectorate versus the electorate, isn't it? Yeah. So the America at large, I think, is crying for anyone but a Biden-Trump.
It's also seeing it as a combination rather than the.
Although I think so, I agree with you because I think
that came out as just complete nonsense and it was kind of just words. So I apologise.
No, it's good. No, because I agree with you. I think the problem is any policies that once guided the Republican Party have gone out the window. It's about Trump the character.
Yeah,
I think to a much less dystopian extent, it happened with Boris, in that any idea of actual policy positions goes. If you say when's the last time Trump talked about the wall, or made a meaningful tenet of his campaign.
We don't
tax
need
cuts
no edge.
Yeah, but anything like that. It's just about Trump the character, the establishment's trying to bring me down. You know, like January 6th was a hoax perpetrated by the CIA. I'm not joking when I say that. Like, that is what the Republican Party is now. That is what the Republican Party membership is. Bear in mind, 2016 is when, or actually 2015 is when Trump first came on the radar. It's been nearly 8 years now of a constant barrage of lies and misrepresentation straight into the minds of Republican Party members that Trump is the greatest human being on earth. And
is he not?
He can't do anything wrong. No, but so in the eyes of most Republicans, it's about Trump and it's about putting Trump in power. And why? Because Trump should be in power, and that's really what it is at this point. So I'm convinced that Trump will be the nominee as well.
Do you think it will be a landslide, or do you think Ron DeSantis will get a few states and it actually will look a bit tight?
I agree it's early to call. I imagine it will be closer because there is it's worth bearing in mind how the Republican primary system works. Because the Democratic system is by proportional representation in the states. The Republicans functions like the first past the post system. That if you win a state by one vote, you get all of their delegates. So, in the popular vote, I think it could be fairly close. But I think in the bulk of states, Trump will win all of the delegates because he'll win more votes than DeSantis outright. Which
even in Florida.
Well, Florida, I think there's a good chance could go for DeSantis. I think because there are a number of Republicans who are, I'd say moderate, not Trump devotees within the Republican Party who would desperately want DeSantis to run and to win. The Ben Shapiro is a good example of that. Ben Shapiro, you can tell, is terrified of Trump running and constantly massages DeSantis's political image because he's desperate for him to win. And those Republicans are disproportionately in the media, in the Daily Wire, in Fox News.
Who do you think Trump's running mate will be?
Interesting. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the...
That's what I thought.
Current talk.
Do you want to, Ben, explain to our listeners some of the views of that particular person?
Marjorie Taylor well, I don't know a great deal about Marjorie. I know Marjorie Taylor Greene has a penchant for saying outrageous things.
Yeah.
She's the one who blamed a storm on Jewish space lasers.
She's quite pro-Russia, if I remember rightly, and almost seemed to call for a civil war at one point. Not quite, but it was
She sort of, you know, if America sort of saw like Nadine Dorris and were like, can we have some of that, please, but like more.
Well, this is the thing about Trump and taking on the establishment of the right. Murdoch is not a Trump fan.
No, and also they weren't last time. Fox News hated Trump when he first ran.
Yeah.
Famously, Megyn Kelly asked Trump a load of tough questions at the very first Republican primary debate way back in 2015. So the establishment has never liked Trump. They've put up with Trump, but they've never actually, and like they've gave him outrageous lying media coverage when he became the nominee and then president, but they've never actually personally liked Trump. They've just seen him as a means to an end, but now their dirty laundry is refusing to go in the wash, and
I like that.
It might have gone on too long, and they might have pulled the wool over their voters' eyes for so long that now they don't want to take the wool off, and they want Trump to stay as the guy.
Yeah, that's true. The political embarrassment faced by, like, that would, you know, be staring in the face of so many of these Republicans that have backed Trump if they then go back on that would be crazy. It's like all of the people over here that, you know, the top Brexit people that would refuse to accept anything else than like Brexit being a massive victory because it would make them look like
woke,
look quite silly, you know, to put it in not actionable terms.
What do we both think then? What do you both think to a Trump-Biden runoff again? What do you think that's going to look like? Who do you think is going to win that? Is it too early to call? Do you think Biden will take it easy, or do you think Trump will win?
It won't be easy. That's the one thing.
It won't be easy because Biden didn't win by loads.
He won by half of Hillary Clinton's margin. So I think Trump.
So the popular vote was closer between Biden and Trump.
The popular vote was further away, but sorry.
Oh, right.
I mean, the margin of loss in 2016,
right.
2020 was half of that in the Pennsylvania, Wisconsin Michigan.
Okay.
The three Rust Belt states that decide most elections. The margin was even closer in 2020. And also, because people talk a lot about the massive upsurge in the popular vote there was for Joe Biden, there was a massive upsurge with Donald Trump too. So both candidates, it is not a close race. And this is what concerns me, is the sense of complacency. Because the midterms, the good thing about the midterms is they demonstrated that Republicans not affiliated to Trump did pretty well on average, and Republicans affiliated to Trump were specifically targeted by the voters who turned away from them. So,
I know, man, Dr. Oz.
no, but good example. Someone endorsed by Trump with the voters turned away from. But it's important to know that it will not be a close. It will not be a easy race for either side. It will be a nail biter, just like every election for the foreseeable future in America will be, in any remotely swing state.
So you definitely think there's a chance Trump could win again?
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't even really want to think about that.
Well,
I just know we're going to be in for an absolute banger rear part of next year, because we're going to have a general election for us a few weeks after the US election.
Yeah.
What do we think?
Too much.
Let's say Trump runs, loses against Biden. What's that going to look like? We saw what happened in 2020 with the Capitol riot. We obviously don't know how Trump will respond, but obviously on his track record, he could respond by saying that he did win and that the election was stolen. Again, he might say that. Obviously, I don't know. This is all hypothetical. I appreciate that. But I don't think it's out of the question that it would be what would happen. What would happen then, based on what happened with his supporters last time, who were not happy about it? What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's tricky, because movements and ideas like you saw that led to January 6th last time after the US election kind of work best when they're kind of quick and impulsive and kind of in response to somebody losing the election after previously having it, right? That works. And also you had the benefit of your media, like your Fox News, pushing that. After that settlement in the lawsuit, I think Fox News would certainly probably think long and hard before going along that road again if Trump tried to peddle that narrative. And equally, there's not really the shock value if an incumbent wins again. The incumbent being removed in favour of Biden holds more stuff to get angry and react to than Biden winning again, I think. But it's certainly, could they try it potentially? I would be curious as to see how well something like that would go.
Yep.
But I think I can't see it happening on the scale again, really.
What I think might happen is, since 2020, so the way that electoral votes are certified is they go through that state's legislature. So they go through the state legislature, they go to the governor, the secretary of state, all review the votes, certify the electoral votes, and then submit them. The good news is, in most swing states, candidates who run on I'm not sure I'm going to accept the election if a Democrat wins ticket have been pretty soundly beaten. The woman who ran for governor of Arizona, Carrie Lake, who was one of those Republicans, was beaten by the Democrat.
Yes.
Last week, someone who ran for the Wisconsin Supreme Court, a pretty low-level election in the grand scheme of things, who there were concerns about their election integrity, was rejected overwhelmingly. So in the swing states, I don't think there will be a problem of Republican elected officials not being willing to certify electoral votes. But in the deep red states, Montana, Idaho, places like this, I think you might well see state legislatures say this is kick up a fuss, basically, about the election.
Yeah.
And
cause
that's
a bit of
my
mayhem.
concern. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it depends, obviously, how Trump responds. It also depends on lots of different things. It depends on whether or not these Republicans genuinely believe that Trump has won, or whether or not they're saying that to ruffle feathers and to just not lose. And because if they do genuinely believe something like that, then they might actually take it further because they believe that this is do or die for their cause.
It also depends on Trump's running mate as well.
Yes,
I think.
and what sort of person that would be. All right, we're going to take a musical break. It is American Pie. It's very long, so I'm going to interrupt it at some point during it. But do enjoy that before we then move on and talk about Dianne Abbot.
This is Greg James, and you're listening to University Radio Nottingham, otherwise known as URN, or EARN if you get it wrong. Go well!
That was nearly all over.
Hello, welcome back to The Big Picture. We are live on University Radio Nottingham. I am Felix Halls. We've had a message in from, to quote themselves, your number one fan, Lucy, who says that she's loving the show as always and wants to have some ABBA next. Well, Lucy, I'll keep you waiting on that one, but you'll see. Okay, our second topic then is Dianne Abbot. So Dianne Abbott has been an MP since 1987, I think, a long time. She was the first black female MP. She's a Corbynite. She was the Shadow Home Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn. She's been suspended from the Labour Party after writing an article in The Observer, which is the Sunday edition of The Guardian. And in it, she said, in short, basically, I'm going to summarise it. Ben and Mark, if you think this is an unfair summary, then do jump in. But she summarised by basically saying that although certain groups of people, and she named them as Jewish people, traveller community, and the Irish, have faced prejudice, it is not the same as the suffering that's happened under black people. For black people, she said that these groups didn't have to ever sit at the back of the bus in apartheid South Africa. They were allowed to vote, etc. And the way it was worded, and again, if you think this is too far of something to say, do say, but it was worded in a way that at least implied, whether or not she actually meant this or not, but that with the suggestion of, although people of white with difference, such as redheads, sort of seem to parallel sort of name calling to gingers to be the same as what's happened to Jewish and Irish and travelling communities. This obviously has received a lot of backlash. She's been suspended by Keir Starmer, who made anti-Semitism his number one priority. He has said that this seems like anti-Semitism. She's been condemned by a lot of figures in Labour, including the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, for this. She's apologised. She said that this was her first draft. A bit odd to, I suppose, when writing about trying to end racism, you end up being racist in your first draft. But there we are. Yeah.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, I don't know whether you both buy that or not. But she has apologised, which separates her from Jeremy Corbyn, who hasn't apologised for what he said about anti-Semitism being overstated. So I'd be curious to know what you both think about this letter, and also, Dianne Abbot's future in the Labour Party, and the criticisms from some of the left of the party that this is Starmer looking for an excuse to kick out a Corbynite. But let's start with the actual letter itself before we move into sort of the political consequences of this letter. Mark, I was going to start with you this time. What do you actually think to the letter itself and the comments made by Dianne Abbott, who we must say has obviously suffered a lot of racism herself over the years?
It's quite bad, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, the content of that letter is, I mean, first of all, the whole idea that, oh dear, it was the first draft. I'm not quite sure if I buy that, in the idea of that in any, as you kind of mentioned, in any first draft of a letter about anti-racism, you accidentally make it racist in the first draft. No, I don't really buy that. I think it's, the decision to suspend her for that is very much valid, and it is a complete, it's a completely nuts letter, really. That being said, I don't think it should take away from Dianne Abbott's ability to, her credibility when it comes to talking about racism. Obviously, she's experienced I think an extreme amount of racism in her time, as a black woman in power, or at least fairly high up in the main opposition party. But again, that should not give her a free pass in this case, and as it's been seen, it clearly hasn't, which is good. There's not really much else I can particularly say about that. I just found the whole idea of comparing the trouble, the discrimination faced by travelling communities and Jewish and Irish people to that of redheads. Like, really?
No, I agree. I thought
it's just so it's insensitive and wrong, and
Go on, Ben. What are your thoughts on this?
No, I largely agree with Mark. I thought that the letter was totally outrageous, and it was right for her to be suspended pending the inquiry. I think as a Labour member, it's very hard for a lot of Labour members because Dianne Abbot is such a hero prior to this to so many of us. Like, Dianne Abbot is someone who, black women growing up in the 60s and the 70s, went to Cambridge as a black woman at that time, how hard it must have been, entered the civil service on the fast stream, could have gone on to a very successful career in the civil service and business, chose not to, chose to go into Parliament, has suffered horrific amounts of abuse. At one point, I think she received more online racist abuse than the rest of MPs put together. It's horrific what she's been through, and she is truly a hero, or was a hero to so many of us on the left. But that can't take away from what she's written, and she should be suspended. And it's hard to see how she can continue affiliation with the Labour Party in Parliament, moving past this, sadly. And that's as someone who really, really admired her and thinks the way the media has often treated Dianne Abbot has been horrific. But there's no defending what she's written.
So do you think that it's the right? It would be the right move to not let her back in? Corbyn, obviously, he is a member of the Labour Party, but has been blocked from standing and is not a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party. That was for anti-Semitism as well. He didn't apologise. Dianne Abbot has. How sincere that apology is obviously up for debate, but she has apologised. Does that make the difference, or do you think that Keir Starmer really has or the Chief Whip has no real option but to block her? Because anti-Semitism obviously was a huge stain on the Labour Party, and Starmer has made that his priority, allowing someone back in who said a comment that the comments that Dianne Abbot has made might not look great for him. What do you think to that, Ben?
So she's been suspended pending the inquiry. She has retracted her remarks. I don't really know how useful that can be. Like, if someone says something anti-Semitic and then says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean it," I don't know to what extent that mitigates the harm caused by saying it. So I'm really not optimistic about her chances. I think the best option for her would be to resign at the next election. I mean, Tony Benn in 2001 famously resigned Parliament to spend more time on politics. I'm sure that there are many ways that she can contribute to the cause of economic justice, of racial justice, of the causes that she cares so much about outside of Parliament. I'm not sure if she can really return as a Labour MP after this, which is really sad, because she's a real hero. She used to be a real hero to so many of us, but I'm not sure if she can return from this.
Mark?
I'm not really sure. You know, as I said, as you've mentioned, she's apologised. What does that, in the long grand scheme of things, what does that actually do, and is that enough to be brought back? And obviously, it could be a real issue. You know, it could generate a bit of controversy if she's let back in. Politically, this has probably been, looking at the big picture.
Clever, thank you.
This has been, to be honest, quite politically useful for Keir Starmer. He's able to sort of get rid of another. He doesn't even have to get rid of them. I think there was someone on Twitter said it must be so nice being Keir Starmer, because you don't even need to be that exciting or get good, but all of the opponents of him just managed to get themselves into trouble in their own accord. That.
Yeah, the Tories,
really
the SNP, the Labour left,
Yeah.
they've all...
They all sort of just fall on each other's swords, and that's the end of it, and he can sort of just walk around with, okay.
You mentioned here about... Sorry to butt in there, Mark, but you mentioned in there about this is politically convenient for Keir Starmer. What do you make to the criticism made from a lot of the members of the left, of which Dianne Abbot and Corbyn were part of, that this is actually Starmer purging the party left? What do you make to that?
Well, I don't know. It's... if you look at how many people are still in the Labour Party and the Parliamentary Labour Party, the Socialist Campaign Group and stuff, who are still very much, vocal about stuff, they're not being kicked out as long as, they toe the line of not being, saying, writing nasty letters. They seem to be all doing okay. Maybe there are probably a bit less vocal than they previously probably could have gotten away with.
Well, the stuff
But
that
for
stopped
ages
the
and
war-
ages, people talk about others being hounded out of the Labour Party and whatever. It isn't a particularly new issue, which I guess is kind of quite an indictment on the party itself, and isn't necessarily an excuse for Keir Starmer, should that indeed be the case.
I agree.
But in this, maybe he is getting rid of all the left-wing people out of the Labour Party. But in this case, in this one individual case, it's, I think quite a lot of the time there are people who are left-wing getting kicked out of the Labour Party, but it isn't because they're left-wing. It's because they've said some pretty nasty stuff.
Well,
Go on, Ben, and do bring up the war, stop the war comment as well in your answer, because that's interesting.
A lot of the Socialist Campaign group were, well, shall we say, tepid about military support for Ukraine
Yes.
when Russia invaded, and Keir Starmer pretty roundly said, and I think they blamed NATO in part for starting the war, and Keir Starmer pretty roundly said, withdraw those comments or you're out the party.
Okay.
Rigid movement. I think I draw a distinction between this particular scenario and Jeremy Corbyn's scenario and the left as a whole in the party, because Keir Starmer might well want Dianne Abbot out the party. The fact is he's got more than just reason now to actually do that.
Yeah.
Not on the grounds of her being left-wing, on the grounds of what she wrote
Exactly,
in the article. But I think a lot of the rest of the left of the party does get pretty outrageous treatment. The best way of seeing that is the parliamentary selections. I believe most of the parliamentary selections of the next election for Labour have wrapped up now. Out of all of them, one of them is on the left of the party. One in the entire country, and it happens to be my local MP, my local prospective Labour MP, Faiza Shaheen, the only one who is on the left, who is broadly Momentum affiliated. Famously, there was a controversy here when a candidate for the Broxtowe constituency was blocked from standing by the leadership. They've done this again and again and again across the country. They actually, Sam Tarry, I believe, has been blocked from standing in his constituency, and someone from
Who Angela Rayner is quite close to.
Yes, and someone from more Starmer-friendly background has been put in.
I think
So,
that's bad.
I think it's not hard to walk and chew gum at the same time and to say what Dianne Abbot has said more than justifies at least the option of removing her from as an MP, a Labour MP, but that the treatment of the left writ large is unacceptable, is outrageous, and does continue on this course of factional infighting that has kept the Labour Party out of power for so long.
It is also to note that, let's say Starmer does and the Labour Party do win the next election to the landslide that polling would suggest at the moment. Obviously, we know from history that might not necessarily occur.
Yeah.
But if it does, and there's going to be an influx of 200 new Labour MPs, which means the majority of Labour MPs will have only just got elected at the next election, which is amazing or crazy to think, really. So the left of the party will be so small at that point. It would be, 10% of the party, if that.
Less, I think.
Yeah, because it's.
I heard there were something like
5%?
13 members of the Socialist Campaign group.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's about 15% right now. So it would be about 5%, if not less than
Tiny,
that. Yeah. Which would be then. So yeah, quite something. Okay, we're gonna have another break. It is ABBA, and then we will talk about our last topic. Thank you very much. Hello, welcome back. Sorry about that slight pause there. So our third and final topic. Oh no, someone wanted to know. Someone messaged in saying, "What's the link to the song?" So I'll say that the link is that Dianne Abbot is in her SOS for her future career. There we are. Okay, so
Nicely.
thank you. Our last topic is the illegal immigration bill. We've talked about this before, but it has now passed. Quite relatively close. There seems to be a lot of Conservatives that didn't turn up to vote on it. Let me try and get the number. No Conservatives, it was 289 to 230. No Conservative MPs voted against it, despite the fact that quite notable figures such as Theresa May and Ian Duncan Smith were both quite critical of many parts of the bill in the Commons, but they didn't end up voting against it. There was a campaign from about 20 Conservative MPs for changes to be made about the detention of children, but that never materialised. The government has basically dealt with that by saying we'll look into it or something like that, I think is the way. So no actual Conservative MP did vote against it, despite opposition to it by some MPs, at least vocally. I can imagine what you both think to this this bill.
It's bad.
Yes, but that's what I expected you to think. So, what are your thoughts on the fact that it's passed, and the nature of it, and the fact that the rebellions that were expected from the Conservatives didn't end up materialising?
Rebellions or not, it would have passed.
Maybe.
And the amount of times in the past few years where, with this current kind of dynamic with the Conservative Party, the amount of times that there's been like potential Conservative rebellion, it always gets quashed. On the last day, the day of the voting, sooner or later they end up giving up, or they say, actually, we don't really want to cause a fuss, so we'll just vote for it anyway, or we'll abstain. If I could get a penny or like a pound for every time that happened, I'd have quite a lot. And that's kind of a sad indictment of the current kind of landscape of the Conservative Party, that even a bill that's sort of so awful and horrible as this, I mean, even if you look at Theresa May's like records in the Home Office, and even she doesn't like it, that's a pretty damning thing.
When Ian Duncan Smith famously Ian Duncan Smith, who tried to reduce child poverty by lowering the standard of poverty, saying this bill is too inhumane.
Yeah, then you're in a bad place. But as I said, sadly, it was always going to pass, and it's passed, and it's just, it's awful.
Yeah, Ben? I this bill is just such a tragic, dystopian view of what the Conservative Party are turning our country into, and it's because all of this is done in the name of patriotism and keeping Britain British. But all of the decent virtues that we like to associate ourselves with, being caring, like being open to refugees,
British values.
Well, the World Values Survey did do.
Abandoning.
World Values Survey did actually do a study again recently, which found Britain to be the least racist country. In of all those that they assessed, they asked about who would you like to be your neighbour and so forth. And many of the questions, like someone who has a different religion, you might say this is still quite high, but only 1% said that would be a problem. You compare that to other countries which are much higher. Yeah. But also Robert Jenrick, who some say was put in the Home Office to sort of mellow out Suella Braverman, but he said a comment recently about values, and YouGov did a poll. I don't have the figures in front of me, but it did show.
Would be a big picture poll if you did.
And but it did show that the majority of the population, and indeed the majority, not a plurality, I should say, of Labour voters agreed with Robert Jenrick that the people coming across the channel did not share British values. However, doesn't necessarily mean they think that's a bad thing.
Yeah. And also, like with these polls, I found out the other day that in 2015, when David Cameron had just got his deal that he was going to put to the people, the majority of Tory members either supported or were neutral on the matter. Tory members.
Yeah.
And then now, if you mention the fact that Brexit isn't going on, it's because you're a woke communist. So polls change very quickly. So I just think it's such a damning indictment of what we profess to care about, and when all you care about is like keeping Britain British and stopping. I mean, one of the things Suella Braverman said that was the most disturbing was back in the Tory Party conference in September. She was talking about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, and she said, "My dream is to see a plane load of migrants being deported to Rwanda." You just have to wonder what kind of country we're turning into when that's the kind of thing.
I was so happy to see the departure of Priti Patel, thinking that, and me, stupid old me, thinking that all of our troubles are over when she left us as Home Secretary. Oh no, guess not. Here comes Suella to ruin my party.
No, and I think Rishi Sunak doesn't get as much blame for this as he should. The Labour attacks that were made about him not caring about child abuse, I don't agree with, but the point of that was to make clear that these things that are happening are Rishi Sunak is responsible for.
Yeah.
This barbaric legislation that we are passing, he is responsible for. The fact that we are considering leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, set up to ensure that the things that happened in World War II never have to happen again, that our membership of that is now in danger, he is responsible for. He is responsible for Suella Braverman. He is responsible for Robert Jenrick. He is responsible for these people. And this legislation that we're passing, he is responsible for. It is the Conservative Party that's led us this far down the road, and the blame has to lie with him for what we're doing.
But the thing is, that's the issue, because with having a character like Sir Braverman as your Home Secretary allows you to offload all of that controversy to her, whilst he is able to pretend to be this sort of more kind of sensible, lenient, administrative figure in charge.
Which has worked for his polling.
Scot-free. Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
That's why he has.
The media coverage of this has been of Sunak in general is absolutely shocking. It's as if Rishi Sunak's smile and signature isn't personally on the bill. It's not him. The fact that these insane, vicious right-wing things are happening under his government is somehow not related to him, and he's still all nice and moderate. I don't know what has happened to everyone since he became Prime Minister, but we are doing horrific things on a near weekly basis, and he is responsible for them. And no one in the media, in broadly speaking centrist or right-wing aligned media, is holding him accountable for it.
You mentioned about the Conservatives leading us down this road. It reminds me of the 2015 leadership election debate that I watched when Nigel Farage was talking about point-based immigration policy, and David Cameron said that Nigel Farage was... he basically disagreed with that from a more left-wing liberal perspective. Yeah. And you think about now what the Conservative Party is doing. It's I'm a mere host with no opinions, but you could say that that's more extreme than the point-based immigration policy. What's going on with the immigration?
Well, the point-based immigration policy was always a Trojan horse, wasn't it?
It actually, yes. When Australia adopted it, the immigration went up. With the point-based immigration system.
It was always a look at this country. This looks somewhat sensible. Let's put that through. But by getting through stuff like that, then you're able to more easily get away with. It's like a Pandora's box policy, really. You can get away with the stuff that they're currently putting through now, and what we're seeing as a result of that. But I do find it, pretty depressing when you sort of look back to that era, as bad as like coalition Conservatives were. To
the Lib Dems,
stuff like that. No comment.
Mark is our Lib Dem, by the way.
Resident Lib Dem. I'm the only one in the University of Nottingham.
Ben, just to wrap us up briefly, you mentioned about the European Court of Human Rights, a Convention of Human Rights there, of which Britain was a founding member of. Only 2 countries in Europe aren't part of that, Russia and Belarus. We've mentioned this before. But
Russia was kicked out.
And Russia was kicked out, yeah. So we'd be the first country to voluntarily leave if we did. What do you think that means to our international... and what does this bill mean towards our international obligations?
Well, it's another example of the Tory party not being fit for anything, because allegedly the one thing that people like about the Tory party is it does an okay job managing the economy. But tell me how you're going to attract international investment when you came within an inch of breaking international law over the Northern Ireland Protocol, when you very nearly destroyed our economic competence for good with the mini budget, and when you're now leaving a basic human rights agreement. The ECHR is not some lefty concoction that was designed 5 years ago. There's something Winston Churchill, not exactly a lefty, was designed in setting up. And that we're now considering leaving that. But not a good look for investment and stability.
But Ben, it says European in it. Europe bad.
No, this is the logic. Yeah. Strasbourg judges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They think that's the level of debate.
They think of the right wing sort of pretend, created ghouls of like Michel Barnier and Jean-Claude Juncker and the other dude, I forget his name.
Both of them right wingers, by the way.
Yeah. But oh no, they're from Europe.
Yeah.
So they just associate them with them and think, oh, okay, then this must be bad.
Right.